2 years ago, my brother and I set out on a Switzerland road trip in order to see the country's most spectacular natural scenery. One of the more highly anticipated stops was Zermatt in order to check out one of the world's most iconic mountains known as the Matterhorn. While there are several hiking trails in the area whose purpose is to showcase views of the mountain, the one we attempted was the Matterhorn Glacier Trail. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate that day, and aside from getting a super short look at the peak, the Matterhorn was almost always covered by clouds. Additionally, the risk of a major thunderstorm coming through prevented us from completing the full hike. So we decided to head out early that day and make a note that we one day needed to return and give Zermatt another chance. Fast forward to 2024, that day came towards the end of a greater than 6-week-long adventure across Europe dedicated to visiting the continent's best theme parks for my other YouTube channel, Coaster Dash. However, we were able to diversify things quite a bit, especially in the latter half of the trip by throwing in some sightseeing and outdoorsy bits. You should already know this if you saw our first ever visit to Norway video. But following our short stay in Switzerland, we also head to Chamonix, France in order to see the French Alps as well as the highest peak in the range, Mont Blanc, for the first time, so stay tuned for that. As far as preparation for today, I've been watching the weather like a hawk, making sure we were visiting on the clearest possible day that week. Our options were fairly limited as the forecast predicted heavy rain and clouds for most of it, but there was an opening for half the day on September 3rd where it looked to be clear enough to finally get our long-awaited views of the Matterhorn. Something to note about Zermatt is you actually aren't able to drive there, you must instead park at the Matterhorn terminal in Tosh where you can then take a scenic train ride into town. I'd say it was at this point where it finally hit me we were back in the Swiss Alps. I was just so excited. Now upon arriving, we decided to make a quick stop for breakfast in order to energize ourselves before many hours of hiking. In 2022, I vividly recall eating at a place called Fuchs, so we went back there and the food was absolutely incredible. I got a sandwich and some pastries, all of which were delicious, and I'll also add that Fuchs is reasonably priced compared to just about any business in Zermatt. Nearby the bakery was our first chance at seeing the Matterhorn from a viewpoint in town. If you'd like to visit yourself, it's located right in front of the DuPont restaurant. Here, it was revealed that the Matterhorn's peak was in fact exposed, a huge relief considering how quickly the weather can change in the Alps. The aura that permeates off of this mountain is crazy. Like, I think if you were to ask me right now what's the most iconic peak I've ever seen, it might be this one. It had just this perfect dusting of snow on the side facing Zermatt, contrasting the other sides that were a lot more barren. Another great view can be found at the river which flows through the town, something that you cannot miss as you're walking towards your first gondola station. And I doubt you would miss it. This point attracts a lot of attention. There's almost always a handful of people taking pictures with their phones and cameras. There's a lot more I could say about the Matterhorn that I'll save for later. As for Zermatt, it really is a great Swiss town. I think if it's your first time visiting, you should do yourself a favor and walk around a bunch, eat at a handful of restaurants and bakeries, and don't miss the church located right next to the first viewpoint I mentioned. We then hit the Zermatt gondola station for the Matterhorn Express gondola, which stops at the Fury station and then continues way up the mountainside to get to the Schwarzsee and Trockener Steg stations. Be sure to take in the views while you're at it. It is incredible with how expansive it gets. Just being around so much snow and so many glaciers is a real treat. Now, the way the Matterhorn Glacier Trail works is it's a point-to-point hike where you can start and end at different stations. A more difficult route with substantially more elevation gain would begin at Schwarzsee and end at Trockener Steg. Or you can do what we did, start at Trockener Steg and make your way down to Schwarzsee. To us, this was an especially good idea for two reasons. A, we had my mom with us who wasn't as accustomed to challenging hikes, but also B, while the visibility was relatively clear, we didn't want a chance not being able to get those up-close personal views of the Matterhorn. These come in abundance right out of Trockener Steg station. You'll hook a right and immediately come across your first alpine lake, the largest on the entire hike. While the color of these tend to not be as impressive as some of the others we've seen in Switzerland, they match the environment well and offer exceptional reflections of the Matterhorn. I could not stop picking up my camera, it was just incredible. Back on the topic of the mountain, it actually doesn't look as massive from this trail as it does from Zermatt, but still it sticks out with its smooth surfaces and jagged peak. A lot of high points that I've visited around the world aren't totally recognizable. Like, I think of Mount Whitney in California, the highest point in the lower 48 states of the United States. It can be hard to kind of pinpoint what peak that is, but what makes the Matterhorn so spectacular is it demands your attention even amongst all of the other amazing mountains nearby. Speaking of which, look the opposing direction every once in a while and you may be surprised by the sheer amount of snow that's present, remaining true even throughout the summer months. Honestly, I love this first portion of the hike as you wrap around the lake. It's one of the highlights, but that's not to say things aren't great thereafter, too. Another cool element will reveal itself, and those are the streams flowing towards the alpine lakes. Oh, and speaking of which, tons more begin to reveal themselves, often small but equally picturesque. Literally every single time I couldn't not take a video shot of the mountain's reflection. It was just straight eye candy. By the midway point of the hike, the mountain unfortunately started to hide behind the clouds, but I was grateful to have gotten any clear view since many people come to Zermatt and aren't so lucky. This was also where we were faced with some surprisingly tough downhill parts that were quite rocky and a little strenuous for my mom to navigate, but we eventually got through it. At the bottom of this valley, you come right up against these two streams that come together, and it's just so cool seeing all of this gray, fresh snow melt rage its way downhill. And then the trail throws in a fun little element being this bridge which crosses over the water and provides a shocking view of a distant glacier, which will become even more apparent towards the end of the hike. But this was a nice change of pace from the standard trail design. I actually wish more things like this were included in the hikes around here. The last third of our journey to Schwarzy Station was by far the most challenging section, despite being all downhill. It felt like constant switchbacks to the bottom, which I'd imagine to be quite the grueling experience for those going the other way. It had also started raining and eventually pouring. My brother even mentioned a little bit of hail as I ran to get an earlier finish.
Well, take this as proof that weather can change at any moment in the Alps. It is pouring, freezing cold, and we just heard thunder. Yet when we got here, it was sunny as can be. Yeah, there were clouds, but it was bright. And now I am just super grateful that we got to see the Matterhorn at all.
I don't doubt that this factor made the last part of the hike especially difficult, but hey, we all eventually made it back to the gondola, concluding the 3.9-mile hike on the Matterhorn Glacier Trail.
Amazing hike, but I am destroyed.
Hi world, we made it.
We finally did the hike after 2 years.
The glaciers were absolutely mythical.
I can't believe I just had my mom do that. That was a challenging hike.
I am so cold and wet all over. But it's so beautiful here. This is like a dream come true. I feel like I'm riding and soaring, but in real life. Oh my God.
Overall, I found it to be quite a bit more difficult than it appears on all trails, but still manageable for all skill levels. There wasn't anything overly technical, and the hike is well worth it for the views. But that's only if it's as clear as it was for us or greater. Otherwise, I can't see it being worth the effort. I absolutely love the Matterhorn mountain. I think it's one of the coolest looking peaks out there, but if it's blocked, that kind of defeats the purpose of the hike. So keep that in mind if you plan to visit. The other thing I'll make note of before we wrap things up is to take all of these gondolas, there's a pretty hefty fee of around 100 Swiss franc per person, which is absolutely very steep. It's why I probably wouldn't come back to do this again, especially since there's so many other great hikes and experiences offered in this country. But Switzerland is a beautiful place, and I think if it's your first time, Zermatt and the Matterhorn does deserve a visit the one time. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Travel Dash for more content like this in the future. And stay tuned because up next we head to the French Alps for a day of incredible outdoor activities. See you there. Bye guys.